Hello, this is Margarita Monet from Edge of Paradise, and you are listening to the Metal Pit Podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit Podcast, where we delve deep into the albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit us on our website at www.themetalpit.org. And you can find us on YouTube at The Metal Pit 666 and on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit. And, my name is Blake, by the way. I don't think I ever introduced myself, but my name is Blake. I run the Metal Pit website. And today I have with me one of my writers, Eric. How you doing tonight?
I am doing great. Are you ready to rock it tonight, Blake?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And since this is your third podcast, right? I think.
You got it.
So I don't have to introduce you. You're from Virginia in the United States. I'm from Ontario in Canada. And we're going to talk about Ronnie James Dio's second solo album, The Last in Line, tonight. This is the first time we've had Dio on. This is our 18th episode, and it's the first time for Dio, which is kind of odd, actually. But anyway, so we're going to talk about The Last in Line, which is the second studio album, released July 2nd, 1984. It is the first Dio album to feature rough-cut keyboardist Claude Schnell, and it became the highest charting album in the US and the UK for Dio, reaching number 4 in the UK and 23 in the US. The Sacred Heart album actually also reached number 4 in the UK. Let's see. And of course, right, and for anybody that doesn't know, but I'm sure you know, but Ronnie James Dio, who of course has been passed away for a while now, but first had his group called Elf, which I have never heard anything from them. Have you ever heard anything by Elf?
I have not. I was curious about them, but I've never heard any of their material.
The only thing I would have heard was what was on the documentary, that Dio document. Have you seen the Dio documentary?
I need to.
Okay. Well, they probably played a few clips on there, but so that would be the only thing I've heard of Elf, because I can't really seem to find it anywhere. And then, of course, he joined Richie Blackmore in Rainbow. And then when Ozzy Osbourne was kicked out of Black Sabbath, he did 3 albums with Sabbath, didn't he? But there was a break. Didn't he come back? Did he?
You're correct. Mm-hmm.
Like he did Heaven and Hell and The Mob Rules, and then didn't he leave and then come back later to do Dehumanizer, I think is how it went.
He did, and that's a heavy and pretty dark album.
Yeah, and they also had a live album together. And then, of course, he did, let's see, he's got 10 Dio solo albums, I believe, if I counted right. And then he also joined Tony Iommi, and I believe it was Geezer Butler, and I can't remember the drummer, but in Heaven and Hell, the group Heaven and Hell, and they had 2 albums also.
Yeah.
So, when did you first hear of Dio or of The Last in Line, whatever came first, I guess? When did you first hear Dio?
Let's see. I want to say I heard Dio in 85, 86, somewhere around that time frame. And I got to say, his voice stood out. I mean, it's really before I got into like hard rock and metal music, but I was like, this guy definitely has his own sound and he's got some power behind his voice. How about you, Blake? When was the first time you heard Dio? And it was one of his solo albums. It was either Holy Diver or Last in Line. I'm about 99% sure.
Well, it is hard to remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I heard him in Rainbow first. Because I had what was the album? Tarot Woman? Is that the name of the? No, sorry, Rainbow Rising. Is the name of the album.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm pretty sure that is when I first heard him. But I could be wrong. It could be Sabbath, and I didn't check out the years here, but obviously Sabbath was before his solo stuff, right? So
it was.
But I am pretty sure I did hear the 2. I did hear him in Rainbow with, in the songs Lonely Rock and Roll and Man on the Silver Mountain and Tarot Woman and Temple of the King. They were definitely a great band, of course, with Richie Blackmore on the guitar. And then, of course, Heaven and Hell song is a classic, one of the best metal songs ever.
Without a doubt.
I would think, yes. And then, actually, funny, he said, I read somewhere where Dio always thinks his first album is better than his second album, including when he was in Black Sabbath, where he thought Heaven and Hell was better than The Mob Rules. And he thought Holy Diver was better than Last in Line.
That's pretty tough.
I'm not sure about Heaven and Hell, though, but they're all, he had a lot of great albums. Where is that? Sorry. Yes. I don't have that. Oh, sorry. I was going to mention the band on this album. I did mention Claude Schnell on keyboards. And of course, Vivian Campbell was on the guitar, which we will talk about, I'm sure. This is probably, I would assume, or I think, his best guitar album he's ever played. I would think it's a lot better than his stuff in Def Leppard, I would imagine.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, the Holy Diver has some phenomenal guitar playing, but I think lead wise, I'm with you on that. Yeah, he definitely lets it rip on Last in Line, the entire album, not just the song.
Yes, and the bass player is Jimmy Bain, who was with Dio a lot, I believe. And Vinny Appice was on the drums, and he also is a great performance on this album too, I find. So I guess that's really all I have to say before we start. Sure, let's just start. We Rock is the first. Yeah, We Rock is the first song. You want to talk about that first?
Oh, sure. So it's funny. I initially thought we were going to do a review for Holy Diver. So mentally, I was preparing myself for that probably a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. And you mentioned Last in Line recently. And I said, you know what? It's perfect because We Rock, I played in a couple bands and we had one singer that he could perform Dio pretty well, but that's a fun song. It's got this just awesome, really driving rhythm guitar and Ronnie James Dio. The chorus is simplistic but very effective, and his vocal melodies in the verses are excellent, and the drumming too. I was remembering that that Vinny does some really cool stuff with the snare drum as well. What did you think of the song, Blake?
Well, yes, we were thinking about doing Holy Diver, and actually you can kind of see with this album, Holy Diver, maybe the next two albums are pretty similar in the song structures, where they both start off with a really fast song like Stand Up and Shout on Holy Diver, which is a great opener. And then, of course, We Rock is also a great opener. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I love Vinny Appice's drums on this album. Just I'm not a drummer person or nothing, and if I ever like anything, it's usually the guitars. But Vinny Appice's drums, I want an air drum or real drum, except I don't have any real drums. But yes, I'm sure this song led off a lot of concerts on that tour, because I'm pretty sure Stand Up and Shout led the Holy Diver tour, and I'm sure he started We Rock on this tour. And that, of course, led us into the title track, which is also something he did like on the first four albums, where the title track would be the second song. And that's, of course, The Last in Line. And this has a slow intro until Dio's kind of softer vocals come in before the song kicks in with his long holding home, sorry. And of course, of course, all the lyrics on this album are wrote by Dio, and we're off to the witch. Of course, everybody loves witches. And I love that we're evil or divine, we're the last in line. And I thought that was a great solo. I guess I didn't mention Vivian on the first song, but yes, I think it's a great solo by Vivian Campbell on this one. And yeah, I'm pretty sure nothing comes close to this is he still in Def Leppard? I'm not sure if he is or not. Def Leppard still around?
They are, and yes, he is still with Def Leppard, but I certainly prefer his playing with Dio. And yes, yeah, you're right, Blake. That Last in Line solo is, boy, it's a piece of work. The rhythm behind it, there's actually some pauses in there. It really lets Vivian's lead playing shine, and he has some great vibrato and sustain, and some really, really good usage of pinch harmonics too. Yeah, he was definitely, I would say, he's definitely one of the guitarists at the forefront in the mid '80s, early to mid '80s, with his lead guitar playing. it's an awesome song. But you already touched on the intro, how dynamic it is. It's slow, it builds up, and it's very musical. But then just crashes in, and Ronnie James Dio just shows you that sheer power that he had.
And this would be the match for Holy Diver. Now, if you had to pick one song, is it Holy Diver or The Last Line?
I have never thought of that before, but I have to say the Last in Line offers a little bit more. So I give the slightest of edges to Last in Line, because I'm a huge Holy Diver fan of the song and the album. But I'll go Last in Line. How about you?
I'd probably pick Holy Diver. I don't know. I just something about that. And it was probably the first solo Dio song I heard, probably, because it had the video stuff too.
I think me too. That's funny.
I would imagine. Yeah. I can't. It's hard to remember some of these albums, whether I heard, since videos were starting to go, of course, at this time. Mm-hmm. So if I seen the video before I seen or heard the album or not, but I kind of think I did. And then we get into Breathless. What do you think of Breathless?
This one has some pretty cool riffs in it. It has that breathing, of course, that kind of opens up the song. You're like, hey, what is going on here? And then it just kicks right in. And it's one of those good, like, mid-tempo rockers. It's not like extraordinary, but it sounds good. It's got a nice hook to it. The chorus is great, as with really any Dio song. I dig the song. How about you?
Well, after the first two tracks that are like kind of Dio classics, the song probably gets forgot about by a lot of people, or maybe I don't know, but yeah, it's a little slower. It's still heavy, but it's still a little slower, and it's short, of course. And I did the last few podcasts. I've been looking up stats on that setlist.fm website. I don't know if you've ever visited that website before.
That's a cool site. Definitely
visited. It keeps track of people submit the concert list that they heard or whatever. And I looked up Breathless, and I couldn't even find that they played it once live.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's kind
now, it could be a mistake, surprising, of course, but it had every other song on the album listed, but it didn't have Breathless listed.
Okay.
But anyway, the song, it's a little slower. I mean, it's not one of my favorites on the album, but I still think the solo is awesome. Again,
oh yes,
another great solo. But the song just leaves a little, I guess, to be desired sometimes. But yeah, it's still good. And then we got, I like this next one here, I Speed at Night. And this is another fast one. But it's short. I'm not sure why he has such short songs back then, but just over 3 minutes long for this one. But when I listen to it, yes, I do speed at night, but of course I also speed during the day, so it doesn't really matter. But I love my demons, they seem to disappear. I love that line. I don't know why. I guess just hearing Dio say demons or whatever, or witches
or whatever it might be.
Or he says rainbow all the time. I don't really like rainbow, but whatever. I like the group Rainbow, but I mean, he's always got rainbow in a song lyric sometime. Do you like I Speed at Night?
I'm with you. This one's just such a blazing song. It has some of that energy and some of that sound from Holy Diver. It's definitely one of his most up-tempo songs I've ever heard. I think it's a great song. I think it's actually a standout track on this album. It's funny you mentioned the track length, because I didn't really look over the track length of any of the songs on here, but I guess it's not surprising considering the tempo, and it's not one of these like epic, it's it's not like a Sign of the Southern Cross or a Heaven and Hell, but it's not meant to be. It's just one of these songs where Dio wants to get his point across. He just wants to kind of just rip it up with the band. Vivian has a blazing, just outstanding solo, and the musician, the whole band sounds great on the song.
It's actually the shortest song on the album.
Okay.
And I guess part of the thing is there's only one guitarist. I guess maybe if there was like Iron Maiden, they had two guitarists, or three now. There'd be trade-off solos that would make the song longer. So maybe that's just the point that, But yeah, I would like the song to be a little longer, but it's still an awesome song, so it doesn't really matter. And then we go into One Night in the City. And what do you think of that one?
This one has a pretty cool vibe to it. It's a little bit on the slower side, obviously. Compared to I Speed at Night, it's probably like more of a snail's pace or something. But it's kind of slower, but it's got a groove to it. And man, Campbell's definitely got some of those pinch harmonics going. They're pretty fierce. I like the song. It's Ronnie James definitely is. He's kind of got this. He just got this like really strong confidence in the song. You can just feel it, in his voice. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, it is. I also had wrote down that it's slow. It's a little slower, but it's still heavy. It's not like a ballad or nothing like that. He doesn't really do. He doesn't really do full on ballads, does he? I don't think much. Not back
Not
then,
too often.
anyway.
All the Fools Sailed Away was a little bit more of a ballad, but I mean that one kind of gets progressive because they pick up the tempo. There's guitar solos. There's even a keyboard solo, so it's not even a traditional ballad. So
Yeah, and just yes, and his storytelling. This is kind of a storytelling kind of song with the story about the couple Johnny and Sally. And even though I don't really know exactly, I guess it's just a couple out one night in the city. I don't really know. I didn't. There's not much, when you look on Wikipedia up stuff about lyrics on some groups, it has a lot, but with this album, there's hardly anything about anything, which is kind of strange. I don't know why.
That's odd because this was such a successful album, which I'm sure you'll tell us about a little bit later. But,
maybe you didn't talk a lot about what the songs meant to him and stuff. But oops, I'm looking at the wrong song. And it's kind of funny to hear One Night Looking Pretty in a heavy metal song.
That did stand out. Yes.
But again, it's still a good song, like you say, but it's not one of my favorites on the album. And then we got, side two, if you're going, because I always mention this since I'm older and I have most of these on vinyl. So I flip it over to Evil Eyes. Now this one is another fast one. This could have been let off the first side too, I guess. And this is a great one. Again, you hear Vinny Appice's drum work is just awesome in the song. And actually I wrote here, I've already said it, looking back, I wish some of these songs were longer because you just want more out of them because they're so good. Especially this one. And this one just comes in at under 4 minutes also, but this is one of my favorites on the album. What do you think of Evil Eyes?
I think it's definitely a cool song. It definitely moves. The drumming is excellent. I really like how he kind of draws out the evil eyes. And, he'll put in like another phrase in there, but it sounds really good. There's nothing to I think dislike about the song. It's got another ripping solo. Dio's I mean his first two solo albums, and I like Sacred Heart, don't get me wrong, but those first two albums of Dio's are just they're masterpieces, and I don't say that lightly. It's easy to say, like throw around that word, or a classic, if you will, but these two albums, Holy Diver, and we're talking about Last in Line Tonight, is, I mean, beginning to end, there are no fillers at all. So I would definitely say Evil Eyes it's a solid song, very good song.
Now, just looking at this playing songs live thing, and of course the Last in Line was played a lot, and We Rock was played a lot, and then I Speed at Night and Evil Eyes were played both about the same, which like 76, 72 times it says. Now, of course, comparing Last in Line, which was played 1,013 times. But of course, he would play that one the most, of course. And and then We Rock was 780 times. But anyway, then we go on to, where am I? Oh, Mystery. Now, this song is very reminiscent of Rainbow in the Dark on the first album. I just mean the feel of it. It's like it's the closest thing to a radio single, I guess you would say. And it's slower and a little more melodic. Again, it's not a ballad or nothing. And I for sure could do without this one. Just like I could have did without Rainbow in the Dark and Holy Diver, because I never really liked that song. Maybe it's just because I don't like the word rainbow in my song lyrics. I don't know. But
that hurts a little bit.
but yeah, those are Rainbow in the Dark and Mystery. Those are my least favorite songs on each of these first two albums.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking that you might not be the biggest fan of Mystery, since it is, I would say it's the most, I think without a doubt, it's the most melodic song on this album. Um, but yeah, I like it a lot. I think it's a good tune. I think some of the lyrics are kind of cool. We are lightning, we are flame, and we burn at the touch of a spark. He's got some really cool lines in here. And obviously that, you have some synthesizers going on. You have a little more open chords, but I think, Ronnie James Dio sounds phenomenal on this album. And it's got that catchy chorus, which I think works very well. Obviously it's meant as a single, but yeah.
Well, I don't
like
know.
it.
Is this a time where Dio was at his peak for his singing? I don't know, because he was really good, of course, in Rainbow and Sabbath, of course, too.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's out writing all the lyrics himself. So of course, all the lyrics are great, except when he uses Rainbow. I don't have anything against rainbows. Rainbows are nice, but I don't know. I'd rather hear about witches and wizards and things. And then we go on to I think one of the other reasons maybe I don't like Mystery is because it comes after Evil Eyes. And because Evil Eyes is so good, and then it's like, oh, this is kind of a, but whatever. Then we get to Eat Your Heart Out. Now this is faster, obviously, than Mystery, but still not as speedy as some of the other earlier rocking songs on the album. I didn't write anything else about this song. Eat Your Heart Out. I think I like the song, but not as well as some of the other ones. Do you like Eat Your Heart Out?
It's a good song. I like how they have some accents with some of the power chords. There's, they have some rests here and there. It's not one of my top songs, but it belongs on the album. I think I do like how they don't end the album on like this song or even Mystery, and they end it on, on definitely on a darker tone, which we'll talk about shortly. But it's a pretty good song. It's not one of my top, once again, but it's pretty good.
That song has only been played 9 times live. Not sure what that says, but. And then we got, as you said, the closing track is like the longest song on the album, a 7-minute. I guess this would be an epic for Dio, since most of his songs are 3 and 4 minutes long. Except, the last in line is pretty long. And then Egypt, the chains are on. And you get some moody Egyptian kind of noises at the start of the song. And I think Dio's lyrics are made more for long songs because he gets to tell his stories, his interesting long stories, more than just saying we rock or whatever, you know what I mean, on the shorter ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a great closer. Yes, and what do you think of this? You just mentioned it, but what do you like about this song?
Egypt is pretty neat. I was thinking about something a little bit earlier between the tempo of this song and Sign of the Southern Cross, which is one of my favorite Dio Sabbath songs. They're not quite the same tempos, but they are slower, and not slower as mellow, but slower as in it's just tempo is just a bit slower, but still very heavy. And it starts off, as you said, with the really neat kind of sounds, that these exotic, tones, and then it brings into this really like dark, there's tension with this. It's in the key of D minor, and he throws in Vivian throws in this tritone there, and it just has this really slow yet aggressive like vibe to it. But then Dio, he tells a story, and man, I mean, his voice, he just really carries those verses. And the chorus is repetitive, but it sounds great. And I like how they kind of slow things down for that solo. And Vivian, he definitely sings on that solo. But it's definitely have to say it's the darkest song on this album. One of the darker songs off the first 2 albums, honestly.
Yes. And this album, like I said, this album came out in 1984. Holy Diver was 1983. And then Sacred Heart was 1985. This is back in the day when groups made an album a year. Some groups made 2 albums a year, which we might talk about when we do our top 10 album thing.
Oh, yes.
But what do you, okay, so for rating it, I know you really like it, you say, and I mean, I really like it, but for me, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10, just because I guess kind of what I was saying, like Mystery, I didn't really like too much, and Breathless, I could have did without, because I would probably give Holy Diver maybe, I think I wrote that down. Holy Diver, I'd probably give maybe a 9 out of 10. So I'd give this, I say I put 8.5, whatever. But anyway, for this one, I would give an 8 out of 10. What would you give it out of 10?
All right, Blake, don't give me a demerit. Don't make me
You can give it a
sit in
10
for,
if you want.
don't give me an in-school suspension. But with, just kind of listening to so much music from 1984, a lot of hard rock and metal, I did not really think about the rating. I got to be honest.
Oh,
and now
okay.
I'm thinking, yep.
Well, you
And
can
now
just
I'm
guess.
thinking, yeah, I would say I do like Holy Diver just a slight edge more than this album. Last in Line is one of my very favorite Dio songs. Top 3 for sure. But I would say the album for me is a solid 8 to 8.5. I'd probably give it, you know what? I'd give it, I think an 8's good. It's one of those albums. I thought about this actually as well. When we first started talking about doing a Dio podcast, I've listened to Holy Diver and Last in Line both well over 50 times. So that tells you how much I've enjoyed these albums over the years. So Last in Line, I'd give it a strong 8.
Yes, and well, that's what I gave it to. So
Yeah.
we're
Yep.
both smart. It sounds like there's the I guess this is the book Collector's Guide to Heavy Metal gave it 10 out of 10. And Rock Hard magazine, which is a German magazine, gave it 9.5 out of 10.
Wow.
And then some All Music Guide or whatever, that's an online music database. It says it only gave it like 6 out of 10. So everybody's different.
Sure.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, Dio, the solo band that is, has 10 studio albums. And as I just mentioned, Sacred Heart was the third one, and that came out in 1985. And then it was 2 years before Dream Evil came out. I found that Sacred Heart was a little more commercial, because it was probably the time of hair metal was exploding and stuff. And, you got to make songs that are going to be on the radio. So I find that Sacred Heart was a little bit not as heavy as the first 2. But then I found with Dream Evil in 1987 that it kind of got back to being out, because I do remember I like Dream Evil a lot too.
I'm with you. Dream Evil's an excellent album.
And then, of course, he was getting into what bands do today. Every 3 or 4 years, he would make an album. And his last one, of course, was Master of the Moon, which was 2004. I think I like Master of the Moon and Killing the Dragon. But some of the other ones, Anger Machine, Strange Highways, Lock Up the Wolves, I would say I haven't listened to those in years, I don't think. It would always be going back to, which is usual with every podcast I do. I always say that. I go back to the first few albums by the groups we're talking about, because those are always my favorite, probably because that's what I grew up on, right?
It makes sense.
Now, have you seen Dio live before in any sense?
I have. My first story is a most unfortunate story. We were going to see Dio and Yngwie Malmsteen. So, I was being a guitarist. I was like through the roof. I was like, I can't believe it. We're going to a show. We pull up to the venue and we're like, where are the cars? Somebody pulls up. Oh, Dio canceled. Ticket sales issue. And we're like, whoa.
Really?
And yeah, F-bombs were dropped and, we're pretty crushed. And I was like, oh man, it just kind of ruined the whole weekend. But it was a Friday night. I'll never forget it, because I remember at school, that's all I was thinking about. And I dragged my girlfriend at the time to the show, and my sister and her boyfriend, we were all going to the show. And yeah, we were pretty upset. My sister said some more spicy things than I did, but I was just I was just kind of stunned, and I was like, this is a sucky, sucky day and night, and hopefully I'll get to see him again. Unfortunately, I ended up seeing him. Now the flip side of it real quick is, I missed him with Megadeth. Megadeth opened for them in Maryland. I missed that show, but then I caught them here in Virginia, like about 20 minutes away, and they played with Priest. And I'm a huge Priest fan, and I thought Priest would put him away. Actually, Ronnie James, I mean, wasn't better than Halford, but their sound was markedly better than Priest. And what's more important is their set list was better than Priest. He sounded incredible. And this is like, I don't know if it was 2010 or 2011, but it was maybe 2 years before he passed. But he couldn't believe how great he sounded. I was really impressed. How about you, Blake? What about you with Dio?
Well, with what you just said, he's got a great, like Judas Priest is good, of course. You said Judas Priest. They're good, of course, but Dio has like he can pull songs from Rainbow and pull songs from Sabbath. And then it's because he has so many songs to choose from, and he always does that where he would start Heaven and Hell and then go off and do Man on the Silver Mountain and then come back and finish Heaven and Hell and things like that. He always enjoyed doing that, but I think that's the 70s rocker in him where they used to do that a lot back then. Now for me, I actually did see him with Yngwie Malmsteen.
Lucky guy.
And that was the Sacred Heart. Was it the Sacred Heart tour, you think you were going to see? Did you say that?
No, I didn't say that, but that's exactly the tour, though.
Yes, that's the one. That's the first time I saw him. And I'm trying to think. It might have been the only time I seen him solo, like solo band, I mean. So I think it was that one. So I remember the sword and the big, it looked like an egg or whatever on stage, but it wasn't an egg. I don't know. I forget what it was, but he was sticking the sword up in this big thing and stuff like that.
I think it was like a dragon's egg. Wasn't it supposed to be like a dragon's egg?
Yeah, and there was a dragon on stage and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I think that was the only time I seen him solo. And I also seen him once with Heaven and Hell, probably after their second album, with Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler, and I think maybe Vinny Appice was the drummer then too, and it wasn't Bill Ward. I don't think it could have been Vinny Appice, but so I seen that, and I actually think Slayer opened up for them, which is also double good. And that was just in London, Ontario, which is a 300,000 city place here close to me. But anyway, I think those are the only two times I've seen him, and Sacred Heart, that would have been 1985, so that's a long time to go back on. Oh, I also think, do you know the group Helix?
Yes, not well, but I do.
Okay, they're a Canadian group. I think they also opened the show, I think, too, before Green Bay, I think. I'm not positive, because it was an outdoor concert in Toronto. Anyway, so that's the Dio thing and that album. And I think, so we're going to do, now sometimes we do top 10 songs from the group, which I'm sure if we did it, a lot of the songs would be from the first two albums. Anyway,
you are correct, sir.
So I thought we would change it up and do the top 10 albums from the year that this album came out, so 1984. So we're going to list off our top 10 albums in 1984 and see if and where this album, The Last in Line, fits on our list. Now, I'll let you go first. You ready? You can go first and start at your number 10, or you can mention a few honorable mentions if you want to, or you can leave that till after I'm done to see if I mention them maybe.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'll pause on the honorable mentions. I don't have many, but I'll start off at number 10. I changed my bottom like 5 multiple times.
Oh wait, before you go on, wait.
Sure.
Fire away, Blake. I said this on your before we started talking on air, that I'm going to predict that 4 of the 10 that you have on your list, I will have on my list, but that we're only going to watch 4. So we'll see how good I am at my guess.
Okay. All right. We'll see what kind of grade Blake gets here. All right, so Blake, I got to thank you for the 8 hours of homework for my 1984 compilation list. But hey, it's music. It's good, hard rock, heavy metal music. So I enjoy it. It was fun. So number 10 for me is Dokken, Tooth and Nail. George Lynch absolutely destroys it. This is actually when Don Dokken could sing really good. Jeff Pilson can still sing pretty good. He sang backups, and that track is just one of Dokken's best.
Back then, I really listened to Dokken a lot back then. But now, as I look through my list to make my list, I guess I just lost my interest with how music changed or whatever for me. So they didn't even make my extras. But anyway, I do remember listening to the first like 3 or 4 Dokken albums a lot back then. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, that's Tooth and Nail, like by itself, the song's just phenomenal. But Turn Up the Action's great. I mean, I like the whole album. Alone Again got overplayed. It's a ballad, it was decent, but the girls loved it. You had the lighters up in the air. But yeah, it's then you have And To the Fire. That was actually a big video hit for them. And I thought that was a great song. And there were some dynamics. It's melodic. There's incredible shredding. Don Dokken's voice really shines on that one. But that's my number 10. Blake, fire away with your number 10 if you would.
Okay.
Or did you wanted me to
hold? No, yeah, you just go 10 to 1, and then I'll do my 10 to 1.
That's probably easier. Hey, you've done this a few more times than I have, so that logically that makes more sense. So my number 9, this was kind of hard. I felt like this would have been maybe a little bit higher, but it's Wasp, their debut album. And it's a strong album beginning to end. I won't go as far as to say this is blasphemy, but I'm a bigger fan of Last Command. I like that album better. Maybe it's because that's the one that I really got into, and I got to know Wasp better when that album came out. But it's a good album. Tormentor is a great tune, man. And obviously Blackie Lawless is into some of the gory stuff that a lot of metalheads and musicians were into back in the day. But yeah, that's a really good album. I mean, I like every track on it.
Yes, I like that album. It's on my honorable mention list. So
okay, good deal. Yeah.
Yes.
Number 8, I had Metal Church. That one was kind of all over the place. Rest in peace, David Wayne. He had quite the vocal delivery. He definitely hit some kind of crazy notes, but he's a pretty scary dude, when he was doing his thing behind the mic. But that album made a lasting impression with actually my first band. We wanted to do Metal Church, but gosh, those drums. I don't know. I know you listen to drums closely. I do too. I'm a guitarist, but I appreciate some excellent drumming. And the drummer's name eludes my memory bank. But I think the drummer for Metal Church is as good as, if not better than, Lars Ulrich. He really shines on that song. The intro's incredible, and he gets this groove going, but he has some phenomenal fills too. And I'm no drummer, but you can hear talent, and he's got it. And that song is awesome. It's a really good album. It ends with a Highway Star. I kind of wish they would have ended on a heavier song, but it's got some hooks to it. And I know the Deep Purple fans will poo-poo me for that, but I figured, like, why not close it with Hitman or something like that? But
I love the version of Highway Star. Actually,
it is good though. It is good. And Gods of Wrath, we tried to cover that in one band. It didn't get very far, but it was always a fun tune to play. And the intro, man, Beyond the Black. Wow, what a statement! It's got that scary kind of demonic intro to it. And, mankind is, starved and died, and the late 1900s. There is no, it's like atomic growth. Pretty intense, and there's some awesome soloing in that. Just Yeah, that song's pretty unconventional too. I mean, there's a lot of soloing, a lot of instrumental moments, and Wayne, does his thing. But it's a very, to me, it's a gutsy introduction song for any band. And you can tell Metal Church didn't care. They're like, this is our style. We came to play, and they brought it.
Yeah,
My numbers.
I like the first two
Go
Metal
for it,
Church albums especially, and they just released a new album last Friday actually with another singer, and I don't remember his name, but it doesn't matter. So go ahead.
Yeah, number 7. This might be, these next two are probably the hardest for me on this entire list because stylistically both of them are different than anything else on this album, probably especially Queensryche. So number 7, Queensryche, Warning. So it is not my favorite Queensryche album. Jeff Tate really, really hits up plenty of high notes on this album. And I guess that could kind of wear on some people. I always liked his voice. I think Rage for Order, the next album, is really where he starts to really the band really starts to develop their own more progressive leanings. This album has more of their kind of power metal-esque. They sound a little bit more like Priest or Maiden, kind of in those veins. I like it a lot though. I don't know which song I would even want to start with. I mean, the title track is great. It's memorable. It's got a really cool groove to it. The bass line is actually really, really nice too. This is actually another drummer, Scott Rockenfield, not to kind of jump on the drummer bandwagon, but this guy's freaking underrated, man. He is excellent. His playing throughout every Queensryche album that I've heard. And I don't like all their later albums, but he's an excellent drummer. But
yes,
yeah, Warning I do like. It is not one of my favorites, which is why it's down here at number 7 for the 1984 grader. There are a lot of great albums as we're gonna cover here. Roads to Madness and NM156, which is just a bizarre album title. I looked at the lyrics many years ago. It's kind of like if computers had a consciousness, which is kind of freaky because AI, we have the AI controversial things going on now, but it's a very cool song. And Roads to Madness is an absolute epic that clocks in over 8 minutes. It's very dynamic, bombastic. I've never really thought of this before. I was never a huge Queen fan, but it has some kind of Queen elements to it, the way kind of the music's kind of presented. But Queensryche, I like, 50 times more than Queen. Sorry, guys. But, Freddie Mercury definitely was one of a kind. But Jeff Tate and the band really, really kind of lead us onto this epic, a great closer for a good album. Not great album, but a very good album with a very strong introduction song and closing song.
Yes.
Number six is my other kind of, there aren't other bands that are really comparable on here, but this is one that I listened to, and this is my, I mentioned this to you before we started recording. This is kind of my nostalgic pick. And I don't get too kind of sappy on my music, but this is a fun one. It's Stay Hungry by Twisted Sister. And yeah, I mean, we're not going to take it. I mean, you want to talk about hard rock anthems. This is one of the biggest ever. This is such a huge single for the band. I Want to Rock, which I like even more, was another one of those songs. And I don't know how this came to be, but at our middle school, and I could not stand my middle school, but they allowed us to stay after one day. Hey, we're going to let you all listen and watch some, hard rock videos. The first one was We're Not Going to Take It. I was like, it's kind of ironic being at school and, them playing the song. And if they only kind of understood the lyrics and the gist of it, they probably wouldn't have let us watch it and listen. But we rejoiced and we enjoyed, and we were loud and obnoxious, but we were smiling and we were happy. So, but Stay Hungry is a blazing, it's like a speed metal song, but Dee Snider, man, his vocal range, especially back in the day on this and Under the Blade, which is another really good album. I like Stay Hungry better, but his voice, man, he can really hit some freaking notes. He's got a nice range. But you also have like The Beast, SMF. So it's a complete album, beginning to end. So
Well,
it
of
had to make
course.
my top 10.
Well, Burn in Hell is, of course, my favorite song on that album.
I was just going to throw that out there. Definitely one of the more kind of ominous tunes, but it's great. It's a great tune, man. And it well received live. You know, I saw Dee Snider play it solo in Springfield, Virginia, and the crowd went nuts. We loved it. Number 5 is the we've been talking about this album during the podcast. Last in Line. I thought it was going to be a little bit higher, but no disrespect to Dio. It is a masterpiece, beginning to end. We covered it. I probably don't need to say anymore. There are no fillers. There are no average songs. I mean, everything is good to great on this album. Number 4. This was a little tough. I don't know where you stand with this band. My throat's starting to get a little sore. Pardon me. So number 4 is a very memorable album. This was a hugely successful album. I'll have to look this up after our podcast to see if this went gold or platinum. It is the Scorpions' Love at First Sting. Rock You Like a Hurricane is the one that really put them on the map. It's probably, well, it's one of my least favorite songs on here. It's a good song, but obviously the radio got a hold of it. MTV got a hold of it. Excuse me. And yeah, this album though, I mean, you start off with, you know, Bad Boys Running Wild, everything, I'm Leaving You. Man, some of the guitar solos on this album are some of my favorites. Very melodic, absolutely ripping though. And I mean, just another guy. I mean, some of the bends that he pulls off. And I mean, you know, Klaus Mean. I mean, Klaus Mean and Matthias Jabs, or maybe it's Matthias Jabs, but those guys, those Germans, man, they definitely, the early Scorpions really rocked. I know they're, you know, last whatever handful of albums. I did not like the whole Rhythm of the Love. I didn't like that stuff. It was definitely more the hair rock kind of sound, but their early Scorpions, they had melody, but they had some driving stuff. Coming Home starts off very slow and soft, but it's a song about where they're on tour for months and months at a time, and it just picks up and it's got passion, very driving, and has some stellar guitar work on there. So Love at First Sting, number 4. By the aforementioned.
I can just tell you take a break for a second. I can just say I never really listened to the Scorpions much myself. Of course, I knew.
I was curious. I know
Rock You Like a Hurricane, of course. And I do see that album went 3 times platinum in the United States, 2 times platinum in Canada. And it only mentions France and Germany for some reason. It went gold in those 2 countries. I'm not sure why those are the only countries it lists, but it made it to number 25 on the Billboard charts in the United States. Oh, that's the song. Sorry, Rock You Like a Hurricane made number 25, not the album, but the song. But it made where the United States, so it made number 6 actually on Billboard's album chart that year, I assume. But anyway, yeah, so they won't be on my list either. So far, we've only got 1 match. We only have 3 left.
Interesting. Well, I've got a cough drop now, so hopefully that doesn't pick up too much on our podcast. But
that's
yeah.
Okay.
So jumping to the top 3. The third one was hard because I felt like the Scorpions were very worthy of that number 3 spot with that album. And Last in Line is certainly up there too, obviously. So it's a little tough, but number 3 is Judas Priest, Defenders of the Faith. You know, talking to Priest fans, you'll hear, you know, Screaming for Vengeance. A lot of people go overboard, in my humble opinion, with Painkiller. It is definitely a metallic album. It's a you know, good to very good album, but Defenders of the Faith crushes, absolutely destroys. Painkiller, Turbo, I don't know. It's one of my top 3 Priest albums, honestly. So it had to make this list. It
Yeah, I
had to
like
go
that
up
album
high.
too. It didn't make my list, but I do like that album too.
Yeah, I mean, Free Will Burning. I mean, you want to talk
Yeah.
about pioneers of speed metal. It's Judas Priest has to get a lot, most of the credit, because that song, the tempo is unbelievable. There's some, I mean, Glenn Tipton and KK Downing, between all those notes that they're playing, and then the dive bombs and Halford. I don't know how Halford gets some of those words, some of those lyrics out so fast. But and then of course his shrieking, man, he hits some, back in the day, he hit some piercing notes. You got Some Heads Are Gonna Roll. That's an excellent anthem. Eat Me Alive. Lyrics are certainly, the PMRC hated that song, but it is a driving, and lustful song. But there's that album beginning to end. I listened to it last night, and I could listen to it tonight. I could listen to it tomorrow. I wouldn't come close to getting bored of it. It's a meaty album. I mean, it's got a lot of attitude to it.
Now I know what your last two are. I just don't know which order they're in. So what's your number two?
That's what I was curious about with you too, because you think more highly of this album than I do. Actually, it seems like most people kind of in my friend circle that actually like metal music, hard rock and heavy metal music, this seems to be their favorite Metallica album. It is not my favorite Metallica album. I do enjoy it quite a bit. It is Ride the Lightning. Fight Fire with Fire is that's a definition of a song where you're like, okay, the first time you hear it, where are they going with this? Where are they going with this? And bam, you just get like a right hook to the jaw or to the eardrum, if you will. And, then they just ratchet up the freaking thrash, man. They just go all out. We know the album inside out. Call of Cthulhu, I'm jumping to the end because that's a bold move to put an instrumental album on your second full release. And Cliff Burton's, his knowledge is all over that album, and Call of Cthulhu first and foremost. You can hear how musical it is. There's quite a bit of tension. Creeping Death, I'm going to kind of work backwards. Creeping Death is, that's just a savage Metallica song. Who doesn't love that bridge in the middle? Die by my hand, I creep across the land. Yes, get those horns up, people. Come on, play it right now while we're listening to the podcast. Maybe not.
Well, actually, our last podcast episode was on Ride the Lightning. So me and Kim did that. So if you make sure you go listen to that if you haven't yet.
How appropriate. Yeah. You've got Fade to Black. It's hard. I like that one. I like Sanitarium. I played Sanitarium in a band. That was one of our better received songs, but yes, it's a ballad, but I mean, it's Metallica, and it's really their kind of, to me, it's the beginning of their prime.
Yes.
So it's a great song. For Whom the Bell Tolls, you'll hear that during sporting events. I thank God they play them at Caps games and hockey games and other sporting events. So that'll definitely get you charged up,
Yeah.
And the title track, I heard the title track on Sirius XM. I know they probably have it up in Canada, I'm sure. It's satellite radio, but I heard Ride the Lightning, the song, and I was kind of surprised. And it was on Ozzy's Boneyard, but I was like, yeah, this song, you don't forget, but you appreciate how well written it is. Just great riffs. Hetfield sounds good. Soloing's awesome by Kirk. That's just an awesome song, man. I love Ride the Lightning. Number one. Maybe Blake can give us a drum roll. You got a drum roll in you? It's okay.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Eddie has one. I don't know.
There you go. I'm a guitarist, so I'm going to skip the drum roll. I just strummed my guitar unplugged up in it. So there you go. I've got a little background noise. I don't know if it even picked that up, but it's okay. I made the effort. Number one. This could be my favorite album, depending on which day of the week it is. But it is the almighty Up the Irons, Iron Maiden, Power Slave. This is it.
I knew that would be your number one or two.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Ace is high. I've got to, kind of run through the memory banks, but that could be my favorite Well, it's hard. It's my favorite intro to any Iron Maiden album. It's my
Hmm.
favorite opening song. Um, you want to talk about tempo? Yep, Nico and the boys really brought it on this. It's a very inventive intro. The guitar harmonies are outstanding. Bruce, man, that air raid siren. I mean, he really lets it fly on Ace's High. The video is awesome with the World War II dog fights as well.
Hmm.
Aces, then you got pardon me, you have 2 Minutes to Midnight. Believe it or not, that's the first song I ever learned on guitar. It was not easy. But I definitely always had an appreciation for that one. I'm not going to go track by track, but
No, yeah, that's
yeah, it's
good.
yeah. Don't want
I'm
to
sure
bore
that's
the.
another. That's a Power Slave will be a podcast episode sometime. I think
Oh yeah, yep. I'd
somebody.
love to be on one, or I'd certainly enjoy listening to one. But the title track, I feel like even Maiden fans don't really have that in their top 10 for whatever reason. I don't have any data to support that, but I feel like now you and I do. But
Hmm.
yeah, Power Slave just has this eerie like undertone to it. And obviously you look at the lyrics, it's fitting. But and Dickinson wears this like spooky kind of Egyptian mask when he sings this one live.
Yes.
But man, that solo section where they bring it down and it just has a lot of feel to it. Then they pick it up, and you got Dickinson running around like he's 25 years young again, and just the solos are just blistering. It's a great song. It's got an awesome chorus too. I wouldn't say it's a traditional Maiden chorus, but yeah, there's definitely some tension in there, and it's a great tune. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, I think it's your favorite Maiden song. It's one of mine. It's not my
Yes.
very favorite, as you know. I don't know how many listeners we had on the old, the last, podcast, obviously for our Beast release. But yeah, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner is top 5 for me easily. It is the definition of an epic, clocking in over 11 minutes. What can you say, man? I'll jump to the middle of the song. Steve Harris with that bass line, the arpeggiations. He's doing this cool thing with these augmented arpeggios. And then Dickinson doing his spoken word. That song is just full of really cool little kind of niches of guitar harmonies. The verses really hold their own. They're really strong and really move through the song. Yeah, Dickinson has a story to tell. That's the way an epic is meant to be played,
Hmm.
and that's my number one. Should
Well,
I?
so
I guess I'll. Mhm.
I was wrong. I only had three of the same,
Okay, that's still pretty good.
not four, only
Yeah.
three. So
So
I'll
I'll
go.
wait. Yeah, go ahead. I'll wait on my honorable mentions till you're done, I suppose. Yep.
Sure, because I might mention
Okay.
some of your honorable mentions.
All
First,
right.
I'll go through my top 10 first, and then I'll maybe mention some of my honorable mentions that you didn't already mention, except Twisted Sister was on it and Wasp was on it.
Okay.
And I forgot about Judas Priest, actually. I was going to put that on my honorable mentions too, because it didn't make my list either. So my number
Ouch.
10 album, which is a group I mentioned earlier, and this is probably because I live in Canada, but it's Helix, Walking the Razor's Edge. It's the album that had the song Rock You on it. Give me an R, give me an O, whatever, which was
Good
the
tune.
biggest song they ever had. Now it's kind of hair metal, but a little bit heavier than regular hair metal, I think. But being in Canada, I like listening to lots of Canadian stuff too. And so that was one that made my list because I listened to that a lot. Number 9, I have David Coverdale's band, Whitesnake. Slide It In, because I love this album. And I actually forgot about that. I was making up my list. I already had my 10, and then I went, oh, wait, Whitesnake. I love Slow and Easy. The song Slow and Easy. And of course, Slide It In and Love Ain't No Stranger. And it's probably the only Whitesnake album that I would even consider for a top 10 list, even though the next one was good. Of course, Steve Vai wasn't on Slide It In. John Sykes was, I believe. And then Steve Vai joined after that. But then there are more trying to get songs for the girls to like them, I think. Number 8, I got Trouble. with Psalm 9, which is their first album. They're a doom metal band. Have you ever listened to Trouble?
You know what? It's funny. I remember back in the day, you were talking about Trouble, and I saw like it might have been like the single, I guess, off of that album, or maybe the second album. And I liked when I heard. I remember I could hear a little bit of Sabbath in their
Yes.
sound, and I guess it's one of those things where it's just since I don't know, like we hadn't really talked about it since years ago. I would have followed through and listened to them. I'm gonna have to jump on Spotify here after we
Well,
wrap up and pull up Trouble. You'll have to maybe after we wrap up, you'll have to tell me your number one Trouble album. But I like what I've heard.
sure. Now, this was their first album, and yes, it was very Black Sabbath like, except the lyrics are about God and heaven instead of about the devil and Satan or hell, I mean, meant to say. So they have like, songs about praying for the dead and stuff like that, and like, but not praying for the dead to rise or whatever, like, Venom would sing about or something. But so some people might have it because it's very unheavy metal almost, like, because there's not that many groups that sing about Christian stuff, especially when you're singing doom kind of music like they were. Now the earlier stuff is like doom, like Sabbath, but then they kind of progress where they almost sound like a little bit like Led Zeppelin, but a little heavier. But like Led Zeppelin, they kind of get hippie like in some ways too. So, but yes, we could talk about Trouble and different albums. And for anybody listening, Manic Frustration is my favorite Trouble album, and that is one that doesn't sound like Sabbath.
Okay.
And they're still, I don't know, and they're still, I'm not sure if they're still making albums. They just re-released their album Run to the Light, which we have a review on our website if anybody wants to check that out. Number 7, I'm going back to a Canadian group again. Now, you might not even know this group, I'm not sure, but it's a thrash metal group called Exciter, and their album is called Violence and Force. And this was their second studio album. And again, there was all these Canadian bands, thrash bands, Razor, Sacrifice, Exciter, and then there's the Pile Drivers, another group, and then there's some hair metal bands like Helix and Kick-Axe and groups like that. And of course, Sebastian Bach from Skid Row is also Canadian. But so I was always listen to a lot of Canadian stuff, so I really love that album. I'm not going to go into it, but Pounding Metal is a great metal song on that album. Now, number 6, who I knew would never appear on your list, is Venom and their album
You are right.
At War with Satan, which is their third studio album. Now, actually, this album it's only got I think 5 songs on it, because one song is a whole side of an album and it's 20 minutes long. So it's an epic for sure. But of course, it's really just, it's like 7 songs. It's just got one story to the whole song. But anyway, it's really that song that makes me give it to number 6, because I love that song. But if you're not into Satan and the devil, not that I'm into it per se, but I mean, horror movie kind of stuff. But anyway, that's my number 6. Number 5 matches yours. It's Dio, the Lost in Line. So we don't need to talk about that. Number 4, I got Metal Church with their first album, of course, which you had at 8, I think you said.
You are correct.
So we matched there. And my number 3 is Iron Maiden, Power Slave. And I guess we don't need to talk about that either. Now, I will say the first 5 that's their 5th album, Power Slave. The first 5 Iron Maiden albums are definitely my favorite Iron Maiden albums of all time. But again, it goes back to me liking stuff I grew up with, I guess. So my number 2, which didn't appear anywhere in your conversation, is Merciful Fate and Don't Break the Oath. That is their second studio album. And I love King Diamond, and more so Merciful Fate. When he was in Merciful Fate, I thought the music was a little better in Merciful Fate than it was in King Diamond, even though Andy LaRocque is great too. But I just love the 2-guitar attack in Merciful Fate. And there was also, and speaking of podcasts, we did a podcast on that one. Me and Stacia did Don't Break the Oath. So go listen to that if you haven't yet either. And my number 1, obviously, you're going to know who that is. Of course, it's Metallica, Ride the Light.
Okay.
And yes, that is my favorite Metallica album, which You'll find out if you listen to that podcast. But Master of Puppets is a very close second. Yes. And I'm going to mention, would you want to mention some of your honorable mentions? Did you have any? A couple?
I only have, let's see, we got 5 here. So I've got Armand Saint, March of the Saint. I've got Yngwie Malmsteen, Rising Force.
That's one of mine too.
If you want to talk about some virtuoso guitar playing, woo. Yeah, he was definitely the pioneer for the neoclassical shredding.
Yeah, but there was only 2 songs with singing, wasn't there in that one? Is that right?
Yep. Yep. Okay, he treated it like, I mean, it was under like a solo album. It was his first, it was his debut album, and yeah, so I thought that was pretty interesting. Yes. Then we've got, I looked at this, I kind of feel bad leaving it off. I was never the biggest like Van Halen fan, but 1984, I mean, that was definitely one of those albums. Like if you liked, rock and roll, hard rock at all, you feel like, okay, you got to like at least a few of the songs on that one, besides Jump. But that's a good album beginning to end. I like it. And then this one, I don't know if you ever liked these guys. I actually saw them at a place in Springfield as well, where I saw Dee Snider. It's Lizzie Borden, Give 'Em the Axe.
Oh,
some pretty cool stuff. I mean, he definitely had some of that British metal influence, that new wave of British heavy metal influences there. So I'm all about the guitar harmony. So they had some of that, some good riffs, maybe a little bit of the, some of the horror lyrics, which I'm okay with. But Borden definitely had a really good voice. I haven't heard him in a while, but it's an EP, but I like it. I liked it quite a bit, especially back in the day. How about you, Blake? Do you have I heard you have a lot of honorable mentions.
I think I had like 11 honorable mentions, where I was getting close, but you've already mentioned a couple. I got Yngwie Malmsteen, Wasp, Twisted Sister, and I already mentioned a couple with Canadian groups, Kick-Axe and Pile Driver. Pile Driver, have you ever heard of Pile Driver?
So I'm going to answer your question with 2 answers. So Pile Driver, I really can't say I've heard of, but you touched on Exciter earlier. And I remember seeing T-shirts for them. Remember in the back of your Hip Parade or your Circus magazine?
Yes.
They always had like some of those Exciter T-shirts, and I was curious about them, but I can't say I've ever heard songs by either of those bands, Pile Driver or Exciter.
Well, if you want to listen to a Pile Driver song, listen to the song Metal Inquisition. It's awesome. But it's really dated though, because they're talking about being in a disco or whatever and dragging you out because you should be listening to heavy metal and stuff. So it's kind of, the lyrics are a little bit old 80s stuff, but it's a great song. And Kick-Axe is kind of a hair metal band or whatever, but a little, again, heavier than your Cinderellas and stuff. But they only had like 4 albums total. But Vice's album was a great album, and they had a song called Heavy Metal Shuffle, which was big on MTV and stuff. And On the Road to Rock was another song on that album that was big on MTV too, or at least on Much Music in Canada anyway. Excuse me. And then another hair metal band, Rat Out of Cellar. I used to listen to that a lot back then when I listened to hair metal.
I didn't even think to look that one up. Yeah. Okay.
So, I like that album back then. And you mentioned Twisted Sister, and then we had Deep Purple's Perfect Strangers. I was a big Deep Purple.
I knew you would have that. I knew you would have the Deep Purple. Yeah.
And so I liked it. It's not one of their best albums, of course. Like it's no Machine Head album or the earlier Deep Purple albums, but it was still pretty good. Perfect Strangers. And then there was this Manowar, who I like a lot. They had 2 albums out that year, Hail to England and Sign of the Hammer. But they're not their best albums, but they're still 2 good albums. And then there was 2 EPs out also. I wasn't going to include an EP in my top 10, but Overkill's debut EP was out then. And Slayer had 2, Haunting the Chapel and then Alive Undead, I think it was called, which had live songs on it, I believe.
Yeah, it had 5 songs.
That's all those things. Yeah. So it was, so like I kind of mentioned, the first 5 are pretty easy to list. And then the next 5 was like, well, where do I put this and this and this? But yes, Exciter, you mentioned Exciter. They're thrash metal, and they were around at the time. Like I have the box set for Metallica's Ride the Lightning, and it has like, those pages from magazines that would have the top readers polls and stuff, and Exciter was in them all with Metallica and stuff. It's just
Oh,
that
wow.
since they're Canadian, they didn't get the exposure they deserved at the time. But I know
Stinks.
that Metallica liked Exciter and stuff like that, and they probably did some touring together and
And
things like that.
that's what I was going to add to you, because I was going to say, I remember like Hetfield being interviewed, and Exciter was a band he would mention sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Anyway, just one more thing I forgot to mention about Dio was the thing about the horns, you know, the metal horns. And of course, this is just for information for people that don't know. But, you know, the horns that people do at concerts, Dio invented that, or at least he says he did, and I believe him. And that because he was in a metal documentary called A Headbanger's Journey. Not sure if you've seen it, but anyway, it's a documentary about heavy metal, and they talked to Dio in it. And I guess Gene Simmons from Kiss said that he invented the horns, but of course he's lying. But Dio's saying that his grandma used to do that to him, and it was called The Evil Eye, actually, which he has a song on his album, but I don't think the song is about his grandma doing the hand signal thing to him. But it was supposed to ward off evil spirits or something like that. And then I read in the Dio documentary, actually, when you get to see this, I guess I won't spoil it for you, but he said
Go
that
for it.
because Ozzy used to give the peace sign when he was singing with Sabbath. And then Dio thought, well, I got to do something, but I don't want to give the peace sign. So he gave that horn sign instead. And that's where it started, was he did it when he was in Sabbath and he didn't want to be like Ozzy. So he gave that metal horn thing, which it's called now. Except there's all these people like Justin Bieber that'll use it and they don't know what it means. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that for anybody that didn't know. And if you don't agree with me that he invented it, well, it's too bad because I think he did.
I concur, and boy, that picked up a lot of steam pretty quickly. You know, Ronnie James with that. And I read basically what you said as far as that earlier documentary. I hadn't seen that before, but I read it in a magazine many years ago about how like grandma would do that to kind of ward off any evil spirits like around him to keep them away from Ronnie James Dio. Yeah. Pretty fascinating.
That documentary, if you can metal, it's called Metal, A Headbanger's Journey. It's a good one. And there was a few. It's done by a guy, Sam Dunn, out of Toronto or out of,
I know the name. Yeah,
he's out of Toronto now. He also did an Iron Maiden documentary, I forget what it's called. Flight 666. He also did that documentary.
I own that one.
And he's done a few other. Global Metal is another one. He's the guy, he's on Banger TV, that thing that's on YouTube. He's the guy that runs it or whatever. He's not on it all the time, but anyway, that's it. So anyway, that was a good talk about Dio, the Lost in Line, and the top 10 list was interesting, I thought. And at least I was close. We had 3 right, not 4, but I was pretty close.
Yeah, you did good.
Okay, so thank you, Eric, for joining me. And I will tell everybody, remind them, visit our website, www.themetalpit.org, and find us on social media. And I've just started to put our podcast also on YouTube, which I might continue to do. So you might be able to listen to this on YouTube if you want to also, but with no video, though, because we're camera shy, at least so far. So thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Eric, for joining me.
Thanks a ton, Blake. It was a great time, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
See ya.